Welcome back to the Star Wars News Net channel. Thank you for joining us wherever you're watching or listening, whether you're on YouTube, Apple, Spotify. I'm joined by Luke today, and we have a very fun episode. We're going to be talking about the future of Star Wars animation because we just finished the Bad Batch. There is no news out there on what the next big animated series is going to be. Supposedly, there's another Tales of the Jedi season that's going to come out later this year. I would assume that they would drop some information on that pretty quickly if that's going to happen. But D23 is just a couple weeks away. So I was like, Luke, let's sit down. Let's go through what we are expecting the show to be. I think we have three show ideas that we think are going to be, main ones that they could do. And then we have like our wish list. We have three wish list show ideas for them to have. So let's start with the three, show ideas that we think these are like really good possibilities of what we're going to get. There may be even some of them a little bit safer. Some of them are a little bit riskier, but then we get into our wish list and we'll really have fun with the wish list.
Those are all risky.
But Luke, you love Star Wars animation. Do you have a favorite animated show? Just before we get into this, what is your favorite animated Star Wars show?
For sure. Real quickly, I watched the Clone Wars first. I started that in 2018. I was kind of late to the game there. But I then loved that, went on to find Star Wars Rebels, and I think I fell in love with that one even deeper. So yeah, Rebels has really captured my heart. It's potentially like my favorite show that Disney has done, live action or animation. It's definitely in my like top 1, 2, or 3. It's always hovering there. So yeah, Rebels has my heart. Absolutely.
Okay. Wow. So you don't hear that a lot necessarily, I think. Not necessarily that Rebels is your favorite animated show, but that it might be your favorite Star Wars show. I think that's definitely, I don't know if that's a hot take because I love Rebels, but for some people it might be like a steaming hot, flaming hot take. But we love Star Wars Rebels here. So I'm not getting on to you for that at all. We stand Kanan Jarrus forever. So let's go ahead. Let's jump in. The number one show, this is the show we think is maybe the most likely to happen, one of the three most likely to happen. And it is the Crimson Dawn with Maul, like featuring like Maul and Kira as, the main show. So the reasoning behind this, and then I'll like throw it to you, is there's always been, I feel like, these whispers, these hints that they are interested in some sort of Crimson Dawn expansion story in either live action or in animation. And with everything that happened at the end of Solo, with Maul, being in there and Kira kind of taking over that faction, of the crime syndicate, there's a lot of story left to be told. And at this point, it's pretty clear they have no intention of, doing a sequel to Solo or making that show in live action happen. So animation seems like the perfect place to do this. And we know that Star Wars fans are in love with Darth Maul in animation. So Luke, take it away here. What would be your initial thoughts if this was announced at like D23, like this is the direction Star Wars animation is heading?
I think there'd be a lot of excitement because, like you said, Maul is very popular amongst us, especially animation fans, but really all Star Wars fans have a pretty soft spot, I would think, in their heart for Darth Maul. 99, he comes on our screen and just blows us away. And so I think he gained a lot of traction in the Clone Wars when he comes back in seasons 4 and 5 in the middle there, and a really cool end to that series with him being central to season 7 of Clone Wars. And then we get a pretty decent amount of him in Rebels as well. So I think we've gotten like the beginning of his story that we need to know. Apparently this middle chunk that we might have thought was the end, but now it can actually kind of, I guess his end is really in Rebels, but we can get a really good middle chunk here of really like the height of his, crime syndicate days. So I think there's really good story potential here. We've already proven that there is with the comics. Kira is a major player in these, and I have not caught up there yet. I'm going to get there a couple months. I know you have. enjoyed those yourself. So I think
Mhm.
that the path has already been paved kind of here for the this
Mhm.
could be successful. I think that's in this part of the show for a reason. It's not on our wish list. It's like a pretty realistic thing here. So
Mhm.
yeah, I would be very excited myself, and I think you would be too.
And I want to be clear that just because this is not in the wish list, it doesn't mean that we don't wish for the show to happen. The wish list is more of the ideas that we think, this would be awesome. We would love to see this, but I don't think that Disney and Lucasfilm are going to go this route. Now, this show is very interesting to me. Of the three main shows we're gonna do, I would put this one at number 2, but I think this one is number 1 for most Star Wars fans. And Kira is a fascinating character. Maul is a clearly fascinating character, but I think the point that would be the most interesting for people on this is the Sith lore that would get that you would dive into, because you're gonna have the Syndicate stuff, but Kira becomes fascinated with like the Sith, and in the comics we see her trying to uncover the secrets of the Sith, and she wants to destroy the Sith in her comic run. That's like her main goal. So throughout this, she's going to be looking at the collection of Sith artifacts that Maul has. She's going to be learning about the Sith. So we're going to get this like lore aspect of Star Wars as well, while also featuring, how is a crime syndicate rising to power in the midst of the Empire and navigating the Empire as well. So I think that part is really interesting, because if you haven't read the book, there's the Crimson Climb book by E.K. Johnston, who wrote, and was really, really good. It was probably the most surprising book I read last year in Star Wars, because I was not expecting it to be that riveting, but it was maybe the most pleasant surprise story that I read. And it's basically all about Kira's rise. And then we have kind of Kira's fall to some extent in the comics, similar to Maul. Like, we've seen Maul's rise, we've seen his fall, but we haven't seen that period of time where he's like truly at his best. So I think this kind of gives us the best of both worlds. And who wouldn't love diving into, some crime syndicate stuff in, Star Wars? I think it's a fascinating time period. And the Empire is this overarching, existing, nemesis that's there, but we don't even have to worry about necessarily diving more into the Imperial story, because we can just focus on the crime syndicates, and it's in a time period I think most people resonate with.
If you
Would you
wanted
agree
to
with
get,
that?
yeah, absolutely, yeah. I don't think we'll ever, I don't think we'll ever get tired of this period between 3 and 4. There's a lot of 19 years there to explore, but I mean, the original trilogy is what started this
Mhm.
all, and so anything that even this closely ties into it
Mhm.
is going to catch people and bring them
Right.
in. And I think if you wanted to get really crazy with this one, maybe like a crazier side of this Crimson Dawn and Maul and Kira, you could have some cool cameos with original, like Han is around
Mhm.
in this time. We've seen his solo movie and how involved Kira was in his life and stuff there. So there could be something there. There could be some cool characters you could bring into this story that would make sense. So I think there's
Mhm.
cool tie-ins as well as this being its own very cool story as well.
Mhm. Yes, that to me screams why this would be the number 1 show out there. And I'm ashamed to admit this right now, but I'm blanking on the voice actor for Maul right now.
Sam Witwer.
Sam Witwer. Oh my goodness. I was like, oh my goodness, I'm, canceled right now as a Star Wars fan. But Sam Witwer, I would assume, like, this is just 100% assumption. I'm assuming that he would love to, put on the Darth Maul voice again and go hard in this show. Like, I would assume that he's eager to do that. He seems like he's a massive fan, loves voicing Darth Maul and other, characters in the Star Wars. So,
Yeah, just real quickly, I was going to say he seems to really enjoy his time being Maul. So
mhm,
I think if they asked him, I think it'd be a yes from him to come on and do
mhm.
this.
So that is number 1 here on our list. So let's go ahead and jump to number 2, and let's go ahead and get into it. An Asajj Ventress series. Number 2 is gonna be, I think, maybe surprising a few people here, but I really think there's a lot here to talk about, because they just reintroduced her in the Bad Batch. And so you could continue in that same era of time that we've kind of talked about. And there has been talks from her and others about how there's more that they're going to tell with this character, that was just the beginning of what we're going to see from Asajj Ventress in the future. So that makes me wonder, are we going to get some sort of maybe a limited, like a 1 season type of show, or, 1 or 2 seasons with Asajj at the forefront, and we introduce like some new characters and go on a new journey with her? That was something that I think really would capture the imagination of some fans. I don't know if Asajj Ventress is the character that expands the animation fandom, but I didn't think the Bad Batch would necessarily be something that gripped me as much as it did. So typically when it comes to Star Wars animation, I trust them to do a good job. And so I would be all for the series if it's, happened. This is probably if we take our wish list and the 3 realistics, this is probably number 6 on the list for me in terms of interest level. But it seems like we're going to hit the Force category here. We're going to have a Force user. There's lightsabers. There's going to be some element of the Clone Wars tying in while pushing to the future. Where are you on the idea of an Asajj Ventress series, or at least a season of Asajj Ventress?
Yeah, I think similarly to you, it's not something that I'm like saying I need right now, but that's absolutely not me saying that I don't want it. I think it'd be a very cool story. There's a lot of potential there. And I'm someone who loves the mystical side of Star Wars and when it gets weird and the Force. And so this would be, I would think, pretty centered on Force stories and finding some weird old temples or artifacts or something, kind of like our first one that we did with Maul and Kira, how that can pretty easily tie in Sith lore. I think this could maybe be Asajj finding her way back to the light, finding some light side Jedi lore and stuff, maybe even stumbles across temples from the High Republic era or something cool that is just a little drawback to Clone Wars or something. So I think it'd be interesting to maybe introduce a new character who's like her running mate with the show, because like we know Asajj, I think it'd be a cool kind of like she's got her buddy with whoever it be. I think it'd be cool to introduce someone new to the Star Wars universe and have them fleshed out as well alongside Asajj, who we know and who has a lot of history. So yeah.
In addition to that, there's the elements, like similarly to the previous show, there's a lot of opportunities in this time period for other characters that we already know to pop in here and there and make an appearance. And yes, Gunji is first on that list. What I don't want, though, is this is kind of how Bad Batch season 1 felt to me, which was like it's this character's time of the week, with it's like, here we go with Rex, here we go with Hera and having that arc with Hera. And it just felt like, every episode kind of had this new character of the week. And you had the sisters that came in that one week. And so I don't want that to happen with this show. I don't want it to become it's Asajj meeting a character we've already seen before, and that helps expand her journey, because I think it takes away from our main group. So, but a couple times a season, I think is fine to drop in some characters that we know. For instance, in Rebels, like Darth Maul pops in quite often, there for a while. But it's not, if you really watch the show, it's not like every other episode Darth Maul is showing up. But when he does show up, it's really impactful.
It's impactful, yeah.
And like when Hondo shows up in Rebels, it's like, oh my gosh, we have our, 1 or 2 episodes of Hondo this season, and it's really fun. So I don't think that they should go, away from having these cameos, but I don't think we should get too extreme where every other episode of Asajj is interacting with someone we already know. I like your idea of let's introduce a new like side character to buddy up with her, or she's going on and she's meeting and we're expanding the Star Wars universe during this time period.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, and again, I don't know if there needs to be like a 3-season Asajj show. I think maybe a 1 season 10 episode, 12 episode. I don't know, 8. I don't know. It's animation, so I'm not going to get too mad about it. The 8 episode limit, but yeah, I don't think it needs to be like crazy long or deep,
Mhm.
but I think there's a cool story that we can go tell with Asajj.
So what I love about animation is I love like my mission of the week with animation. And so Rebels kind of feels that way throughout. Like it's telling an overarching story, especially, but that's to me more of season 4 is telling like a big lengthy story about the liberation of Lothal. But throughout most of Rebels, it's like we have, these little arcs. It's our little mission of the week arcs. And that's kind of what I love about Clone Wars as well. You have these little arcs, and it doesn't necessarily tell one singular narrative. Now, the Clone Wars, yes, we know it's about building up to the Clone Wars. It's like all involving that. But what I mean by that is I could spend time over here on Moncala, and then I could jump over to Toydaria, and then we can have the D Squad go off for a few episodes. Like I kind of like being able to jump in. It's just a fresh mission of the week and not like this continuous line, because I think that can be difficult sometimes with these animation shows for me personally. I think that's just kind of the vibe I want. And I wonder how much legs does a show have with Asajj if we're doing like this kind of mission of the week aspect. I think with her would be a more centralized, clear storyline that we're trying to tell. And I just wonder what Lucasfilm is looking for with this next animation project, because we have Tales of the Empire that came out in May. We had Tales of the Jedi that's supposedly coming out this year. I wonder if that's still happening. We're waiting to hear more on that front, and I wonder if maybe they're looking for something that has longer legs, like a Crimson Dawn show could last a few seasons. So I'm wondering, exactly where we're heading with this, but it still feels like an Asajj Ventress, something's on the horizon, and the best place for that could be in a limited series here. And who knows, maybe they do her like in Tales of the Jedi because of her past, and that's what they were hinting at. But if they're not doing that, somewhere along the lines of here and the next animation project seems likely. Do you have any other thoughts on Asajj before we just go ahead and jump to our third item on the agenda?
I don't think so. I think we're ready for number 3.
All right, so number 3, this was your idea, and I was a little surprised at this, but the
This
more
was
I
your idea.
well,
Condescending.
no, that was not condescending at
I
all.
know
I
it
was just
wasn't.
saying like this was your idea and it surprised me. I just want to give you the credit where it's due. This one surprised me a little bit at first. Like, is this really something that should be on the list? And the more I thought about it, I said, you know what? I feel like that's accurate. Like, I feel like this is a show that Disney and Lucasfilm want to tell because it's purely theirs and would expand a time period that probably needs to be fleshed out a little bit. And this was a Poe and Finn post The Last Jedi story. And Luke, I'll let you kind of take this away, but correct me if I'm wrong here. You're talking about like Last Jedi ends, Poe and Finn. You're following. These are our two main characters, and they're kind of helping rebuild. Leia's going to be in this as well, but we're rebuilding the Resistance because there's only that small group of people. And when we see the Resistance in, the Rise of Skywalker, it seems like they've expanded, quite a bit at this point. So dive into what your vision for the show would be and why you think that, this is on a, what we think is going to happen versus a wish list.
Yeah. I think these two had good chemistry, so I think they'd just have a fun just dynamic between these two characters. And so that's kind of what drove it, is that I do like these two characters together.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, when we see the end of The Last Jedi versus the beginning of The Rise of Skywalker, the Resistance feels like it has stabilized. It feels like it has grown.
Mm-hmm.
And so I do want to just see some cool missions. Again, it maybe is a 2-season show, maybe 10, 12 episodes. I'm not saying anything crazy. There's not that much time to go into. I think there's only a year, maybe a year and a half between 8 and 9. So yeah, I would love to see some missions where these two, I don't know if Ray would even be involved in the show. It'd be cool if we could do that. But these two for sure are going around some harrowing supply missions or recruiting missions that are really getting at the heart of civilians who feel no hope and feel like the First Order is the only choice.
Hmm.
And for these people to provide that little spark of hope that they talk about in the sequel trilogy, this
That's a good
spark
point.
of hope to kind of get these people to realize that like hope is not lost. You do have a choice to choose good and not just
Hmm.
follow tyranny. So I think there's deeper themes to explore here, like the Bad Batch did. So it's kind of that feel, but sequel trilogy and fleshing out characters that I think it could only benefit them to have a little bit
Hmm.
more screen time. So
It feels like there is a big jump because where we leave them off there, it seems like they're at their weakest. Like this is the smallest they are, but it's like, okay, we have our band of leaders together after The Last Jedi. And then, like you said, in the beginning of Rise of Skywalker, it feels like the conflict has been ongoing. Like the First Order is so tired of this resistance and they're ready to wipe them out. And it feels very much kind of like there has been multiple conflicts going on throughout this time, even though the First Order is clearly, the big, person in charge of the galaxy right now. I wonder though, I think some of the problem is there is a level of this hasn't been around long enough. Like the sequels haven't been around long enough for the mystique of the First Order to really rise. And there's so much of an, imperial like dupe that it probably just feels like the lesser than version of the empire, which it pretty much is. But
yeah,
I mean, with stuff that happens in Rise of Skywalker, it kind of adds to all of that. But I think that getting more into the First Order and seeing them commit acts and of like these atrocities and horrible things, but getting like a really like boots on the ground, like gritty level of like Finn and Poe having to go recruit people, intense missions where there's a lot at stake and you get to meet other resistance members, I think would add a lot of context for people in between these movies and add to the sequels, which I think Clone Wars adds to Revenge of the Sith so much. And Rebels adds to the sequel or the original trilogy, and like Rogue One adds to A New Hope. I think that doing a series like this would enhance some of the weaker parts of the sequel trilogy. I really think that we need something like this set in this time period. And I believe that there would be enough interest for Disney to be able to do this. It feels like there is taboo. It's like taboo to talk about the sequels or to enhance the lore of the sequels in some people's eyes. But because the Mandoverse is technically in the sequel era, but it's closer to Return of the Jedi than it is to The Force Awakens. So
yeah,
it still feels so closely tied to the Empire and what we know versus what is to come that I wouldn't even specify that as like sequel territory necessarily. And so I wonder if having an animation show could get granted, it's like animated Star Wars fans or like the diehards, that are watching all this stuff anyway. But at the same time, it would help, I think, fill some gaps and provide some context in some areas that, frankly, could use a little boost. And I love Finn. I would love to watch more of Finn. I think you definitely would have Rey in this show. Poe is the character I would love to see more fleshed out because I never really gravitated towards him as a character in the sequels. It was always Rey, 100% Rey, Finn until the Rise of Skywalker when he really kind of gets put on the back seat, and Poe was always just kind of in the background. And again, we could introduce Chewbacca could be in this show. You have the droids that you like. Leia is going to be a part of this, but let's meet a bunch of new resistance fighters. Let's meet new people that are involved in this movement. So I really think that your idea was sound here.
yeah. And like you have already just brought up, I think there's an opportunity to seed things that come to fruition in the Rise of Skywalker, like maybe Hux faltering on his commitment to the First Order, or just other things like that that maybe some people felt came out of nowhere or didn't have enough explanation in the Rise of Skywalker. I think this is an opportunity to just really quickly give you a little bit more that could maybe help people who don't like the sequel trilogy end up going, you know what? That does make sense. Now that helped me really process this. I think these are sitting better with me. So I just think it's an opportunity to like you've said, like
Mhm,
all these other projects have strengthened something, one of the movies, and so I think this
mhm.
is an opportunity to just uh, give a little more strength to the sequel trilogy and especially Rise of Skywalker.
And what does a Kylo Ren led First Order look like?
Yes,
We like let's dive
yes,
into the strategy behind the First Order, seeing Kylo Ren at the head of that. We don't see that very long in, the sequel trilogy because he is in charge there at the very end of The Last Jedi, but it's clearly like there's a power struggle. But it looks like in The Rise of Skywalker, his power is firmly like in hand. Like he's in charge. You see all of like the chiefs, the joint chiefs there, and he's like, I am in charge. And but we don't see him really doing a whole lot because he kind of goes off on his own some as well, and then ultimately turns back into bins. So it would be great to see more of that fleshed out here in this show, as well as Price. Is he communicating with Palpatine? This whole time, like, is like adding in some of the what's going on in Exegol could be something in the background with
yeah,
certain, First Order members that are in the know about what's happening on Exegol. And so I think that there are a number of different threads that you could weave in together that enhance the sequel era and could get people more excited about certain things maybe they weren't excited about at first.
yeah. Maybe even like my last thing that it would weave in is just some Knights of Ren
Mm-hmm.
content too, just things that could use a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, yeah, you're definitely
to
right.
put it to put it mildly, with the Knights of Ren, could use a little bit more.
We have the
Um,
one comic series, but that doesn't really give you more about the Knights of
mhm.
Ren like I wanted. So yeah,
Right. So let's get into our wish list here. These are the shows that we have three here. So we have three main shows and we have three wish list shows. These are the ones that we would love to see take place. These are the ones that we think would maybe be more impactful than the three on the watch list. I'm not saying they would be. In our eyes, these are just things that we're really excited about. But we don't think that they would go this direction yet, or in some cases maybe ever. Like, we'll see. But let's go ahead, let's start with number one. Tell me before we put this up there, is this number one on your wish list or no?
you're gonna have to. I think I'm gonna need to be reminded which one is coming up first on the
Oh my
wish.
goodness, I that's on me. Luke and Ben, Jedi Order. Luke and Ben, following Luke rebuilding the Jedi Order with Ben Solo. Is this number one on your wish list?
Um, I think so. I'm gonna put it as
Okay.
number one on my wish list. Yes. Luke Skywalker is my favorite character, along with millions of other people. And I even have a Ben Solo Funko Pop sitting on my office desk at work. So I love these two characters. And we got some of their relationship in that Rise of Kylo Ren comic series I was talking about, which is only 4 or 5 issues.
Mhm,
So I think there's still more that we need to, or can. I'm
mhm,
not going to say need, but I would certainly like more of
mhm,
this relationship fleshed out. We see just a little bit of it in the Shadow of the Sith novel.
mhm.
Um, so yeah, I think that there were some cool missions these guys went on, and just that little comic series. I think there's a lot more that we can tell about
Mhm.
these characters in this relationship. So again, I think people are not, the Last Jedi didn't hit for a lot of people, so I think this could also help strengthen a movie that didn't sit well with people. I
Mhm.
think it could really just help.
So this is number one on my wish list, but I also think this is last on the list of things I think will ever happen. I think that they're
True.
afraid to do this. I genuinely think that they
I
are
do too.
afraid to do Luke Skywalker Ben Solo content right now. I hate to say that, but it screams fear. Like, what's going on? Like, they're shying away from some of this because of the backlash of The Last Jedi. And this is why I think this show would be great, because I think the people that love Luke's arc in The Last Jedi would be satisfied by this show, because you would see Luke's, we see him at his moment in the Return of the Jedi, throwing the lightsaber away, saving, helping save his father, who then saves him in return. And now we're gonna get Luke the Legend post, right, the Return of the Jedi, building the Jedi Order again, trying to pass on what he learned. His relationship with his nephew, that is maybe the most important relationship in the sequel era, given what happens because that relationship falls apart. Seeing that played out over multiple seasons, I think, would be fascinating. Seeing how Luke goes about recruiting Jedi to join his order. How does he recruit people? Is he recruiting like younglings, like the same age that the Jedi Order was looking for? Is he looking for people a bit older? Does he have a preference? Like, what is his teaching style? There's so many things I would love to learn about Luke Skywalker in this period. And the people that love his arc in The Last Jedi are going to be satisfied because they know that this legend of Luke and some of the maybe hubris that he ends up developing himself, they're okay seeing that play out because they know how Last Jedi ends. And I'm one of those people that love Luke's arc in The Last Jedi, mainly because he ends up becoming the legend that we all want him to be in the end of that movie. And so I think seeing this whole story played out, and I think I really want to see Luke and Ben's relationship is really important. Now, the people who do not like The Last Jedi, the ones that are not able to, maybe not like The Last Jedi, but they don't like Luke's arc in The Last Jedi and what happens with Luke and Ben. That's a whole argument for another day. But I think this show could satisfy some people as well, because you do more hinting and showcasing the darkness within Ben. You could also showcase moments where Luke falters a little bit and maybe makes some mistakes, but are normal mistakes that we could see him make. Because I think it's okay. I think those people that do not like The Last Jedi, I think the main problem they have with Luke is not that Luke Skywalker makes mistakes. It's that Luke Skywalker completely abandons the galaxy after making those mistakes. And in the big mistake was, igniting his lightsaber in front of his nephew. If you told this story and we got to see more of the visions Luke may have been having about the darkness within, Ben, or see some of the visions that he's having about what would happen if that darkness took over in Ben, or you see some of those things happen that maybe make the road a little bit smoother to Last Jedi for these people, I think that might help, bridge the gap between some of the Last Jedi haters and some of the Last Jedi supporters, because I think that there is a commonality between those two groups of people that they could easily find to both acknowledge the high points of that movie and acknowledge some of the low points of that movie. And when we disagree on those, be able to at least come to a rational conclusion on that. But right now, it's like if you're on either side of that spectrum, you're so entrenched, you're unable to see the other person's point of view. And maybe this show could serve as the thing that could bring some fans together in terms of like how this story played out. And also, it's Jedi Order story. It'd be fun. Like, let's go on some Luke and Ben missions, like uncle nephew missions.
Exactly. And you brought up some really good points there that this could really pave the road and make it smoother. And something I was just thinking about was kind of detailing that, like, yes, Luke has failed Ben Solo, but I think maybe people think that that's the only side to this, and they're missing the fact that, like, Ben Solo has not been a perfect pupil as well. Like, there's some darkness in him. He has chosen to disclose things that he should be sharing with Luke. So I think that it might help people to see that, like, Luke is not the only one who is in the wrong here or has done anything wrong at all. Ben and maybe even other tertiary background characters are also not helping the situation. So it's more complicated than people think, that, like, Luke just messed up. Oh, this person that I thought was my hero of my childhood is now ruined. Like, it's not the case. We're all fallible. The Acolyte has shown us that the Jedi can be fallible. So yeah, I just think it would
the prequels
maybe help people process that. What
the prequels show us that. Yoda exactly. Literally in Empire Strikes Back is mourning all the choices that he's made over the course of his life. I mean, there's so many reasons, but Also, you could even tie in the formation of the New Republic a little bit into this, because we could get into, even there could be some flashback episodes into Luke training Leia and what that looks like, and Leia having the vision that Luke talks about in Rise of Skywalker of, her son and who would pick up her
Yeah.
saber in the end. So like there's a lot of ways to tie the sequels together with a show like this. So I am for this show. This would be my number one. Sounds like it'd be your number one. Let's move on to our second one. Let's go ahead and talk about it. A High Republic animated show. Obviously, we have Young Jedi Adventures, which is an animated show set in the High Republic for, the younglings out there. But this one is interesting because I'm gonna sell you on my vision for the High Republic show, and then you tell me what your vision for this show would be. I would love kind of a story of the week with various Jedi. I don't think this show needs to follow the books necessarily. Like we're going to just do what happened in the conflict against the Nile. Although that would be really cool to see. I think there's a big story there. I also don't think this should follow maybe even phase 2 stuff, like, with what's going on in Aram and Arano. I think that having a show set hundreds of years before the Jedi, this is going to be the Jedi at their peak. And I think that we could have just kind of a mission of the week sort of show with different Jedi and their apprentice. You could call it like High Republic, Master and Apprentice, something along those lines. And it's just following the different council members, the different Jedi out there going on missions with their Padwans, or little Padwans getting into missions together. And ultimately, similar to like how Star Trek operates a lot of times, you'll have recurring characters. Like it's not like we get with one Master and Apprentice and we never see them again. They will show up again, and we just continue to further their arcs through episodic storytelling. And maybe each season has like maybe a theme, or there's a recurring villain that takes place. There's a conflict that kind of escalates that require Jedi to team up and solve. But I think this will be a really cool idea if we get into some different force powers that are more prominent during this time period, because the Jedi slip away from the light as time goes on. But here we get into the origins of different of these force powers. The lore of the Force would be expanded. The lore of the Jedi would be expanded. And it's a chance to just really do some wonky things with the Jedi as well, and different alien species. So my question to you, is that something you would like, or would you prefer them adapt some of these books and novels into a High Republic series, and maybe showcase that conflict with the Nile as a way to improve the publishing initiative?
That's interesting. I was not even considering that, because I think the publishing initiative, I don't have the numbers in front of me of how well it's doing, but I think it's doing well. I think it's selling. We're obviously in phase 3. And they keep going, but
I've seen numbers. I don't know how accurate those numbers are, because it's hard to tell on some of those things, but it's doing well. It's doing well enough.
that's what I thought. I mean, so my thought was that we don't need to do that to help ourselves out. And while it would be cool to see some of these fantastic stories come to life in picture in front of you, I'm much more leaning toward what you've described here. And I don't know like what specific year this would take place, or even what specific characters we would have. But yeah, I'm really closely thinking what you were thinking, just kind of a master and apprentice, or even like we have this cool tale of this guy named Barnabas Vim, who like is kind of just this memory of characters that we have in the High Republic. I think he seems like this incredible adventure type of guy, and so something maybe along the lines of following him. Or there's a lot of cool smaller stories that you can tell with the High Republic that don't have to be galaxy changing. The High Republic is just so cool with the Force lore that we've explored, and how different you can get from the movies but still feel like this is the same universe. So I think this is a really good chance to get people interested in this time period with a different story that isn't the Nile. Doesn't have to be,
right?
But then they get into these books and they're like, wow, this entire era has captured me. This is awesome. This is a completely new part of the timeline that I can just camp out in. So I think it's a
Some
great
of this
idea.
some of this could depend on when this show would come out. Like, when does this show premiere? Something tells me it's going to be fall next year. I don't know. I just have a feeling like sometime that's just me spitballing, just because they don't have animation lined up for next year. And so there's like, maybe like a Visions 3 or another Tales of blank, but I would assume they have something lined up in the pipeline soon. So I'm like, if they're doing High Republic set post this publishing initiative, they want the publishing initiative to be its own thing, they could just do something set after that. And it release after the last book by Charles Soule comes out next summer. But if they were adapting it based off these books, I think that would be really fascinating. People would have a really good time with that. And we've seen before that just because there is a show out about books and it's adapting that doesn't mean that audiences won't still love that, even if they know the outcomes of certain things. So it could go a number of directions. I think there's just the sandbox to play in with the High Republic is so vast because of the possibilities of being that far removed from the start of our main timeline. So let's get into our third one. And we talk about an endless sandbox to play in. So this is like the third on our wish list. This is number 3 for me personally. And I believe, Luke, is this number 3 for you as well?
I do think it lines up there. Yeah.
Post Rise of Skywalker animated show. Okay. Do I think there is any chance in hell Disney is releasing a post Rise of Skywalker animated show before the Daisy Ridley movie comes out? No, I don't think that there's any way that they would do that. However, it's on the wish list because we're just dreaming and wishing and, getting excited here. The Rise of Skywalker, the future after the Rise of Skywalker, the Rey movie has such an incredible opportunity to, and this is a whole nother conversation, but Star Wars has really struggled to be relevant as of late because of a number of issues that there are within making some of these stories and gravitating to new audiences. And some of that blame is placed on certain parts of the fandom as well. But a lot of it lies, with Kathleen Kennedy, the people in charge, and the stories that they're making. I say that as someone who loves a lot of these stories. The Rise of Skywalker definitely had mixed emotions about it, but the stories beyond it, this Rey movie has a chance to be that new thing, this new piece of relevance that expands us beyond what we've ever seen and is not tied to anything that has to come after it, because it can do its own in the future. Having a show maybe bridging the gap from Rise of Skywalker to wherever this new movie happens could be a really good idea. And you can make that show in a way that is not necessary watching for anyone doing, this Rey movie. You do not need to include like all of these important parts of Rey's story to get her lined up for this movie. You do not need to include a lot of parts of this Finn story to get it where it's going. I don't think any of that is necessary for this show, but you could still have those characters in and talk about what's going on, and then the movie can be its own thing. It is set what, 15 years after? Is that what
Yep.
is that accurate? Okay, so it's like 15 years. I'm curious though how they would thread that together, what that would look like. But see, maybe this doesn't come out for, another year, and it's really close to the movie, and it's something to get some fans excited for this new movie. Where are you right now in this post Rise of Skywalker animated show? And you know what? It doesn't even have to follow Rey, Finn, and Poe. Even like those people, they could be like tertiary characters that pop in. We could just blank canvas something brand new. Boom. How are you feeling about all of these things?
So I was going to go the route of kind of what you just ended with, that this movie could really, this animated series could really prop up the new Jedi Order movie by kind of unburdening it from it could explain how Finn gets to where he is when the movie starts. It could explain our villain, whoever that might be, so that it's not necessary watching that this story has taken place and you feel like this movie is like chapter 3 of 3 all of a sudden. It's like the movie is good, we're hoping, and then if you want explanation as to how these characters maybe got to this point, if you're just curious, well, here's this animated series that tells you, here's the backstory of the villain,
Right.
more fleshed out than you had in the movie. Here's how the resistance has grown, how has this new government
Whatever they
entity
end up
ruled
doing.
over. Yeah, so I think there's just a good chance to like give explanation or exposition to things that you might end up feeling like you want after the movie's over.
And it
Or
could be like a way of establishing what happened. Like it could take place, days, weeks after the rise of
yeah,
Skywalker, like the aftermath of that, connecting the galaxy together again, eliminating the last remnants of the First Order, and establishing whatever this new government looks like, this new system looks like. And there's, certainly elements of the Force that you can have within that. But I think, there's a blank canvas to play with here. And
Beaumont Kin, main character, let's go.
I am reading the Rise and Fall of the Galactic Empire right now. It's really good. It's really
That's
good.
why I said that, because I know you are.
It's dense, but it's like really good, and it's dense in the best ways. I am just curious. I want to ask you though. The reason why this is on the wish list is because I don't think they would want to do anything until that movie.
Correct.
What would be the easiest way to alleviate concern from people if this show did come out? Let's say they did do this somehow, and then the Rey movie comes out, but people are concerned about, oh, do I have to watch this animated show before I go see a movie? How do you tell them no? Like basically, even though the show would predate, is the first thing that predates the movie. Like how would you write that show in order to make sure it wasn't necessary watching?
I think we would use Dave Filoni as a template. I know he was asked all the time, do I need to watch Rebels to watch Ahsoka? And he would say, no, but I really think you should. And so I think writing a story that just kind of details, I think the story might even be like a one series type of thing, but if it's 12 episodes and each 2 or 3 episodes is an arc, kind of like we're going to get with Andor season 2, you got an arc here, you skip some years, an arc here, you skip some years, and so you kind of like roadmap your way from the day after the rise of Skywalker, week after whatever, until like months, a year, days before New Jedi Order. And so it's not some like compact story that is completely relevant to New Jedi Order. I think it's something that will be a very long, expanded bridge that will help you just kind of get from one point to the other. Kind of what I'm thinking.
I can get on board with that. So I'm excited about whatever this animation project is. I feel like an announcement is coming in the next few weeks. I really do. I think D23, we're going to hear in August. I think we're going to hear about what this new animated show is going to be. I would love to hear in the comments, like, what do you guys think this show is going to be? One of our 3 that we think or on our wish list, do any of those like gravitate towards you more? And also like, what is your prediction? Like, because I think there's a very clear, like, there's a reason why Luke and Ben is on the wish list versus what we think is going to happen based off of what we've seen from Disney, Lucasfilm, and the Phantom. So what is on y'all's wish list? What is on your top of your list of what's going to happen? I think it's going to be fascinating to see. Please subscribe to our channel here on YouTube. Leave us a 5-star review on Apple, Spotify. Follow us there. You can always watch and listen to the Star Wars Newsnet channel every Monday, Thursday, and Saturday. Mondays, like today, is the show of the week to kind of get you going, on those Monday blues. So this is always a topical discussion about something going on in Star Wars at the time, or, just whatever we feel like vibing about. The last few episodes we've done Luke and I's Mission of the Month episode, which was really fun. We had a Star Wars Outlaws discussion, and then Miguel and I did a 3-episode movie talk about each of the upcoming Star Wars films. On Thursdays is our Star Wars Newsnet live show. You can always join us on YouTube here for the live stream Thursdays at 10 o'clock Eastern time. And then the audio for that is usually up sometime on Friday if you just prefer to listen the next day. And then Saturdays are always for the Star Wars timeline, as Luke and I dive into the next, story on the Star Wars canon timeline. This next Saturday, as you're listening to this, would be episodes 7 and 8 of Young Jedi Adventures. We're going to be in there for the next couple months as we just dive through that. It's a slow burn, the timeline show, but it's the best kind of slow burn. I think it's cool to get a deep look at every single piece of canon material. I just pretty in-depth review and talk about those things. So like and subscribe, leave us those reviews on Apple, Spotify. Luke, thank you for joining me on this Monday. I am looking forward to watching and talking about whatever animation show does come out here with Lucasfilm.
I am too. And if I could put you on the spot real quick, do you have one joke one that you would make? Just a joke show? Because mine would be either like Tales of the Banking Clan. Just so boring, but it's like the Munes talking about all these regulations that they're deregulating, or something like Tales of the Gungans or something.
Tales of the Gungans. I think where I'm going with this. I think you can predict what mine's going to be. Can you?
Is it something Palpatine related?
No. The Rise of Meeber Gascon.
Okay. Yeah, that's got to
be Brigadier General or whatever he was through the Empire. The Tales of Meeber Gascon, that would be number one. Or I think oh my gosh, Tales of the Gungans is good. What about Watto's Worries? And it's just Watto's just flying around, selling stuff all day, gambling on everything.
You're seeing his best deals.
You're seeing Watto's deal of the week. So Watto's deal of the week is just him, doing some gamble or the gamble. It's like those like podcasts that are like all about sports gambling. It's like, here's the deals of the day, and Watto's like talking to you about the lines for the latest pod races. I think that would be a terrible idea for a show that I would unfortunately tune into.
That I would watch.
Yeah, there's just endless amounts of like ideas for Star Wars shows. Like, can you think about like the handmaidens of Padme's handmaidens doing like a Padme story, like set.
Absolutely.
When she's rising in the story of their handmaidens, there's obviously like Tales of the Sith. You get into like the Sith, Old Republic. There's so many ideas. Like, I want to hear people's ideas for these things, like joke ideas, but like real ideas, like all of those things.
Give us all of that in the comments.
So good. All right, Luke, I will see you later. Thanks for listening, everybody. For Light and Life, remember, we are all the Republic.